Welcome in. I'm Colette Whelan. Thank you so much for joining us. You are tuned into a new segment here on our Late Talkers Journey channel. It's called Interview with the Experts. And today's expert is the founder of a financial management and trust firm that supports families of children with special needs. Please welcome Ryan Platt, the founder of A Special Needs Plan. Ryan, thank you so much for being here.
You got it. Well, Colette, thank you for having me.
Ryan, let's start with you kind of telling us your mission at A Special Needs Plan.
Well, our mission is big. Our mission is to reach 1 million families that have a loved one that has some sort of support need in their life. And so that could be where they need 24 hours, 7 days a week care. That could be where maybe they just need somebody to check in on them every once in a while to make sure that life's going okay and to see if they need any help. So it's a wide spectrum of who we serve and who we want to serve. And the reason that we want to reach 1 million families is we want families to have the necessary education and information so that they can make the best decisions possible that make sense for their individual situation, their entire family, and their loved one that may need some level of support. That's why we love doing these events, because we can reach more families this way, and at least they know that this type of resource is available for them if they so choose to continue to research it and look into it.
You know, we work with a lot of families of late talking children, and we know that not all late talkers are going to require this type or level of care, but we know that a lot of them are. So, you know, when is the right time for families to start thinking about that?
I think it's an interesting question to answer because I think a lot of families struggle with that question of, do I really need to do this kind of planning? Is this really what I need? Or is this really what my family needs? Or is this really what my child needs? Do they really need this kind of a safety net built for them? Or are they just going to be just fine? Are they going to, be able to navigate the world? Are they going to be able to get that job and financially care for themselves? And so we have so many families with that question. And they come to us at all ages, especially, children who do well in school, right? Maybe they're academically doing great. And then they're able to go to college and they still do academically great. And then all of a sudden, we've had so many families that their loved one gets into the workforce and it just doesn't work. The workforce is a different animal than the educational system. And sometimes it's hard to get along in that area of employment. So what we say to that question is, planning doesn't mean that you are placing a limitation on your loved one's future. Planning means that you're building a structure that allows them to grow. And if they need help, that structure's there to help them be more independent, not to bring them or tie them down. So it allows them the ability to adjust as long as that structure is built. And the structure needs to be built with flexibility for that exact reason, because we don't know what the future holds. We don't know what their needs are really going to be. So if we build a great structure and a great support system, well, then you know what? You adjust the support system. If they don't need the safety net, you drop the safety net down. If all of a sudden something happens and you have the safety net built already, all you do is lift it back up to hold them for a period of time. And we see that so often with the families that we serve. Because we do have families that have loved ones that end up getting full-time jobs, and those full-time jobs are working well. And then all of a sudden, some trigger happens, something happens, and that full-time job falls through. But if we've built that safety net in the right way, right? We can just raise it up and catch them for a little bit of time until they kind of get back on their feet.
In your experience, do you see a lot of families that just assume this type of planning is for children with maybe, profound challenges and don't really factor in behavioral challenges that might come up when they're in the workforce and then not be able to be financially independent?
We do. We do that. We do find that quite a bit, especially as you're just kind of going through the educational system, because the educational system is super in the fact that it's very structured, right? This year, we're going to do this. We're going to do this therapy. We're going to work on these goals. And we're going to try to reach these goals doing these certain items. And we're going to have a plan for that. And if your loved one may excel in that and they get to 18, 19, 20, and all of a sudden they leave the educational system, the world doesn't have that kind of structure anymore. And sometimes that can be a challenge. And so we just want to make sure that we're there to support families if that event does happen.
So, how does your process work? When families come to you for help, can you kind of just break down step by step for our listeners how you get involved and how you help them?
So what we do is we have an initial phone call just to determine if our process fits for their family and their situation, right? Are they in a position where they're like, okay, I'm not sure if my son or daughter is going to need all of this. However, I'm not sure they don't. And I want to make sure that whatever they need, they can get. Whether that is, certain help from government benefits, whether that is certain supports from the community, whether that is certain housing arrangements and living arrangements. I want to make sure that there's a pathway for my child to receive it, right? If the parent says that, or the family says that, then we're probably a good fit. If they say, you know what, I just don't believe at all that my child's going to need this support, and I think they're going to be just fine, and this is not something I need to move forward with, then that's okay. But our organization is just not a fit for that family at that time. It's not to say we won't be later, but at that moment, we're kind of not there. And the reason for that, Colette, is we do have a very specific planning process that families really need to be bought into, because it is very detailed and very in-depth. So after that first phone call, we then begin the planning process, which is, a 2-hour session, understanding exactly how the family is designed, so to speak, who the family members are, what's going on from a financial perspective, government benefit perspective, tax perspective, but also daily life perspective. What's happening on a daily life in the family, and what level of supports or therapy right now is going on for their loved one that is a late talker. Right? What are you doing right now? What does that look like? What have you done in the past? How has that helped? Where have you seen the growth? Because what we're trying to do is understand, with all the different families that we've served since 2005 across the entire country, we can get a good idea based upon how they describe their child, how they describe their growth and development patterns so far, maybe where they will end up. Again, we can't tell the future, but what we're doing is, because we serve families who come to us at 2 months old, and some families come to us when their loved one's 45 years old, right? So we have a wide spectrum of experience with different levels of abilities and different age ranges. So if somebody comes to us with a 15-year-old who's not quite talking yet, and we understand, what have you done, since they've been 3, and what kind of therapies have you done, and how has that helped them grow, and where have you seen some of the growth, and where have you not? What we can do is help the family understand, hey, maybe we need to at least have a plan for this level of support. based upon what you've told us, right? So we can help guide them in terms of how we should plan and what you should have in place based on what you've told us. Again, built with enough flexibility so that their child can grow and develop as they need to, and then the plan can also shift. So that's kind of a first 2-hour session, is to understand all that. And then we come back with another 2-hour session after we put together, that what we call their story, right? What's going on in their family? Where do they want to see everyone in their family? So if they have other children, they want them to go to college, or they want them to, whatever they want them to do. Their loved one who's a late talker, where do they see them going? How can we help help make that happen? Also, what do the parents want for the rest of their life? Because their retirement or things like that. Because if their loved one does need financial assistance, we need to understand what the parents' financial plan looks like as well.
Ryan, these can be very scary topics for families. And I imagine that some of them come in with a bit of fear of what this might look like, and the fear that their child might not be financially independent. What do you usually say to these families, and how can you make them, come around to the idea that this might be best for them?
That we're there to support you, and that you don't have to do it by yourself. You're absolutely right. It can be a very daunting and overwhelming thought as a parent that says, okay, if my child does need support, I'm here to help them. Great. But all of a sudden, if I'm not here to help them, what does that look like? And that can be a stake in the heart. That can be the wake up in the middle of the night with, night sweats, staring at the ceiling. It can be very fear ridden. And what we want to show families is that there's a path. There's a path to walk on that is clear, that they don't have to be the trailblazer. They don't have to try to figure it out all on their own. And they're not on an island by themselves. They can have support. They can have resources. And what we say is they can have a guide, right? We want to be their guide to help them on this path, because we've been down it already. So we can help them avoid the pothole over on the right-hand side. So walk on the left-hand side on this part of the path, so that they avoid that. So that's the biggest thing that we say is we come to them and say, listen, if we promise a lot to our families, and we're expected to keep those promises, and we want to hold them. I know that sounds corny, but we kind of want to give them a hug and just be there, as a supportive expert guide, so they don't have to be by themselves. And that's really our goal.
Well, and I imagine there's a lot of peace of mind when you can come up with a solution for a family.
Sometimes just in that initial phone call conversation, Colette, we get so many people say, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. And we haven't even done anything yet. But the reason they feel better is that now they actually know somewhere, some entity, some organization that they can go to get help. Because this kind of planning, Colette, only about 6% of families with a loved one that needs some level of support ever do this kind of planning, this kind of comprehensive planning. And the number one reason why is they just don't know where to go. They don't know who can help them and who has the expertise to help them. So when we have that initial phone call and describe what we do and how we can serve, that's the response we get from a lot of families. They're like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. This is great. I feel like a weight's been lifted off my shoulders. And just like you said, we haven't done anything yet, but just because they know, okay, at least I know
Well,
that
just
I can
knowing
get some
someone's
help.
there, there's someone that can help, because since they've never done this before, like you said, the path, you've paved the path. I know you kind of touched on this, that every family would get a unique plan because every child is unique and not everybody's story is written in the same way. Kind of just talk about that approach a little bit more, please.
We take quite a bit of time, probably at least 6 to 8 hours with the family to learn about them before we put together any sort of strategic action plan. And then once we put the strategic action plan together, it doesn't necessarily stop there either. because what we found with this level of planning is that it very well may involve other members of the family. And so we want to make sure that we communicate what this plan is to other people that may be involved in their loved one's life at some point. Right? If their loved one does need some level of support, some help, again, might just be a few hours a week to check in on them, right? That's it. Well, we want to make sure that those people who will be doing the checking in understand what life looks like for this person. So we want them to understand what the plan looks like, what's in place, what's set up. Because what we found is that those other people, and it could be an adult sibling at that point, right? It could be one of the siblings. And what we found is a lot of times they don't have a sense of independence. So, and here's what I mean by that is I've gotten several phone calls from adult siblings who are 50 years old, and they say, hey, you know what? You know, my dad has already passed away. My mom's 85. My brother does okay, but my mom still helps him here and there. And I just don't know what that looks like. I don't really know what she's doing. I don't really know if there's a structure in place to allow that to happen when she can't do it anymore. And I have a family and I have 3 kids and I have a job, and I just don't know what I don't know. I don't know what I would need to do that my mom does already to make sure my brother can keep doing what he's doing. And so those people don't necessarily have a sense of independence, and we want them to feel independent as well. And a lot of times, Colette, is just that communication of the plan is, hey, this is what it looks like. This is what's in place. And this is maybe where you can help.
It sounds like, the overall quality of everybody's lives improves once they have a clear picture of how to move forward and what their days will look like moving forward. So, Ryan, is there anything else that you'd like to add at this time before we say goodbye? And thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, no, I so appreciate you guys having me. I appreciate the Late Talkers Foundation. I love your guys' mission of giving parents insight and knowledge and resources of support. That almost lines up exactly what we say. We always say, our kind of 3 pillars are education, action, and support. Right? We want people to have good resources and education to make good decisions. But then we want families to take action, because without the action step, the education is not going to be any good. Right? I always say knowledge is power, but I don't believe that's true. I believe applied knowledge is power. You have to do something with it. Go do something with that knowledge. And then support, just like you guys said, right? We want to be there to support families for as long as we need to make sure that that individual that may need support gets it when they need it.
Ryan, thank you for echoing that message. And thanks so much for your time. We would encourage, if anyone has any follow-up questions, we're happy to pass them along and get those to Ryan. So you can always go to the comments and questions sections of this page. And while you're there, please hit subscribe, hit the bell, because we'd like to keep getting you this valuable information. And obviously, the Late Talkers Foundation website is 24/7 open for resources for families.